Let me start out just by saying I've been doing field day since 1967. And I was with a bunch of kids called the West Valley Amateur Radio Club. No adults in there, but we used to win our category every year nationally. And we were very serious about it. And now a bunch of those guys, those kids, are now in the CQ Contest Hall of Fame. So even though it's not a contest, we sure treated it like one. We set the all-time field day scoring record back in the late 80s, and it stood for like 11 years. So that's what a contester does with field day. But obviously there are a lot more elements to it. This year I went out again with our auxiliary communication service for LA City, N6ACS, and we had a number of objectives. So the main one was to get people who haven't been on HF much to get on. And in that regard, I think we succeeded pretty well. Of course, most dyed-in-the-wool contesters will sit there and go, leave me alone, get my headphones, your key or your mic or whatever, and you log everything, and you're by yourself. But we found that by teaming people up, even though it may be a little less efficient to have a logger separate from the operator, it allows them to reinforce each other, some coaching and so on. And so that worked quite well in a number of cases. Even when I was running CW, I had somebody logging for me who read a little bit, it was a little fast for them, but they were trying to keep up with it and listen. And all I had to do was call out what it was. And so that worked out well. We had a bunch of new equipment we wanted to try out. We've gotten some things from grants, and we've been putting portable stuff together. So we had our mesh network we've been putting together for alerting for the city. In some areas where the radios don't work for, fire evacuation and so on. We got a new tactical repeater. We have a new trailer that will transport a bunch of this stuff out to the field. We put on a dedicated digital station for the weekend and had our main digital operator show other people how to use it and give them a chance to try it. A lot of things worked. And as a result, our contact total was up over 50% from last year. So overall, we were happy, but we did find a few things that we need to, some learning points that we need to reinforce. One was I found the folks on 10 meters had made almost no contact Sunday morning. I said, what's the matter? He said, oh, nothing's on. I said, that seems kind of surprising given the way the bands have been. And I said, well, yeah, but look at the band scope on the radio. There's nothing on it. I go, oh dear. The noise level on 10 meters, I said, is very, very low. And you can have signals that are perfectly readable that don't show up on a band scope, maybe even don't show up on your S meter, but they're there and you can work them. And started tuning around and, hey, they could work people. So we should have had that discussion, obviously, before field day started rather than on the last day. But that's something that people who have not been on HF, particularly on, a variety of the bands, wouldn't necessarily understand. They come to rely on some visual graph or something. That's, they need to use their ears, and we want to encourage people to use their ears because that's how accepting the digital stuff, of course, if there's a signal there. I guess the other thing that we learned is there are these little cheap, simple devices called rope tensioners, and we weren't using them. And it made all the adjustments and tensioning and getting everything level much more laborious than it needed to be. So a very small investment, you can even make them, would probably make that process go a lot more quickly and would be equally safe. I think that's about it for what I wanted to bring up, but I want to hear from everybody else about how their field day went and what worked and what didn't, and what are you gonna change next year?
Before we do that, Anthony, can you bring up on the desktop what he's talked about, the rope antennas strengtheners? You're muted, Anthony.
Marty, when you work multiple bands, do you have band captains to work together to coordinate everybody so they're on certain sub-bands and stuff like that, and be sure that they don't go off to the edges of the band illegally, or like as Bruce said, someone was working sideband and they were on sideband?
A good question, Barry. As far as organizing the effort, yes, when we were doing the West Valley Club, yes, we always had band captains who were responsible, not necessarily for providing all the gear, but knowing where it came from, knowing it would all work together, that the key plug and the key jack are matched and stuff like that. This time, we did have a couple of people responsible for setting up each station, but we wanted people to experience a number of different bands. So they would go from one band to another to work it for a while to see what the propagation was like. And by the way, in my estimation, propagation was wonderful compared to prior years. We had bands that were, 20 was open almost 24 hours a day, 40 was open 24 hours a day to somewhere. So I was very happy with the propagation, and that allowed us to move people around. If we have somebody who's not familiar with the band, for example, they're on lower sideband, we want to make sure that they know that they can't get down to the nominal bottom of the band, because the sidebands will go outside the limit. So we suggest some tighter limits for them and kind of check to make sure that they're staying there. But yes, we do make sure that they don't go off where they shouldn't be.
Marty, I have pictures up of some tensioners. I'm not sure which type you were using, but there's a number of different ones.
We weren't. That's the point.
Okay.
And we need to.
Well, here's a couple of the common ones. This is one that you can slide on afterward. You have to have this part on the rope, but then this other part is totally flexible. You can just, as long as you have this part on the rope, you can slide this part onto any portion of the rope and tension it.
Yep. So you would put it through whatever stake eye you have or whatever, and then this whole part would be on the end with a couple knots, and then the rest of it can slide up and down the active rope, and very quickly adjust that tension. There's a fancy one that probably costs more.
One. These are the ones that probably cost the most. These are the ones
that's
that have
night
a
eyes.
ratcheting action. There's also these type, which I would avoid. I don't suggest you use those. I've had lack of success with those. Then there's these very simple ones with just basically, if you have a piece of flat surface with 3 holes in it, it gives you the ability to set up a simple tensioner. These are not the most effective. These type here are probably much more effective. The first one I showed you. And then there's also this type of tensioner that has, again, a ratchet type action to them. Make sure if you're using any of these that they're designed to hold up not just a tent stake or a tent, but to hold up something major. So you have to be careful. You can find a lot of tensioners that are designed for a couple pounds of pull on a tent stake, as opposed to a support for a vertical or for a mast or something along those lines. So just be careful when you are choosing these to make sure that the working weight of the tensioner is sufficient for what you're doing.
Very good.
And what happened when you didn't use them, Marty?
It took longer, to untie and retie and so on. I see one of the comments was to use a trucker's knot. If you know how to do that, those definitely work. But just something other than, you put a bite in it and then you just pull the rope back and tie it off to something. That's that's kind of slow adjustment as opposed to something you can do quickly.
Yeah, and also if you're depending on people tying knots, unless you know the person can tie the knots and you've practiced the knots ahead of time, I never trust anyone's knot if I've never seen them do it before. Now as opposed to what Marty's talking about, I had a little bit different type of field day setup. I was pretty much a typical POTA setup, and I was at a national park. I had a mast pipe, and I had a end fed, and I had a vertical. So I had 3 antennas, which was a little overkill for POTA, but it was much more like a POTA operation with 5 watts and batteries. So, and it was a single person operation. So there's both extremes out there of different types of operation. I'm going to download some pictures and I'll show some pictures of my site a little bit later.
Now you were operating from West Virginia, is that right?
Yes, I was in Watauga State Park in West Virginia, and I made the mistake again. I've run into this before. It's a place I didn't work from before, and even though I had decent propagation, I was still down in, as they would say, the holler. And even though I was up at about 3,000 feet, there was some areas around me that were up at 4,000 feet. So it made penetrating to the west a little bit difficult. So I wasn't at a prime spot, but I had plenty of people to work on 40, and I spent
Yeah, well,
most of my
you're
time on
back, you're
40.
back there in the thick of the ham population. And
Yes,
and
it's a
that's one of
big
the things that makes
difference.
it tough for us on the West Coast, is that we have to penetrate that with our 100
Yes.
watts and a dipole. But speaking of height, in the last couple of years, we put our 40-meter dipole in the trees kind of down the hill. And this time we put a separate mast up and got that thing up about 30 feet on a helipad. And I don't know if that made a part of the difference, but it certainly, I mean, 40 was the busiest band we had, and getting stuff up in the clear, a little extra effort can be well worth it.
I have a suggestion that I learned this year. I am not a good thrower, and I've tried throwing ropes and I've had some success. So I tried something a little bit different this year, and initially it was a total failure. What I did is I have a 31-foot collapsible vertical that's made out of fiberglass. It's basically a pylon for holding up flags on airfields. But it's before I set up my vertical, I used it to try and drop a weight over top of the branches by lifting it up over my head. So I was basically dropping it over a 40-foot branch.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I couldn't get it to release because there was no mechanism for that, and the weight got tangled around the top. But what I did figure out was by just putting a piece of I had builder's twine. I made it so I had about 60 foot, and I taped that to the very tip of that 31-foot antenna. And then instead of trying to throw it over a branch, I went for a stubby broken off branch. There was a number of pines. So I was just able to reach up and just basically drop both ends of the wire on either of the rope on either side of it, and then pull it up that way. And that was extremely quick way to do it. And there was no throwing or ripping out of shoulders involved.
Oh, now we use two methods for getting stuff, wires up in the air. One is, one of our guys is a manager with the Department of Water and Power, and he has one of these 45 or 50-foot telescoping fiberglass poles they use for switching equipment on poles. And he used that to loop one rope, one line over the steps on an old phone pole. The other way we have is, I have a pneumatic tennis ball launcher, and you use a fish, just a fishing reel, put it in cast, and I have tied it to a tennis ball, shoot it over the trees, and then we use that to bring up a heavier line that can actually bring up the antenna. And that, A, it's fun, and B, it works pretty well.
Hey, John, BSV had his hand up. He's taking it down. He still will ask your question there, John. 87 BSV.
Yes, I was just going to comment that the old Boy Scout taut line hitch works extremely well. It's easy to tie, easy to adjust, doesn't cost you anything. And I mean, I use it on all my permanent antennas. They're up all winter. So 40 mile and 50 mile an hour wind.
And that's what I used also. But again, I wouldn't trust anyone else that I didn't know knew how to tie it. So again, if you're a one-man operation, it's a little bit different than when you have multiple people, especially new people. So I think it's a great idea, but I would have a rope tying class first if I was doing it with a group of people.
Yeah, that's really a good idea, because I'm surprised how many people don't know how to tie knots at all. And I mean, I use a bowline as my standard for tying off to the end of an insulator or something, and a lot of people have never seen that. So yeah, good idea, John. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll show you a little bit later, but I had a push-up flagpole that I used, and it was being attached to a mast, a clothesline pole that was in the ground. So I used clove hitches to make sure that it was held in the right spot. So knowing about 5 or 6 basic knots can be really helpful. Maybe that's a good idea for a club project before field day, but don't wait until field day to try and explain to people how to tie knots.
Very good.
Okay, has anybody else got a question out there?
Yeah, ISA.
Oh, Paul's got his thumb up. ISA, go ahead.
Yeah, on field day, we were in a parking lot, and we had permission from the owner and such, and we put these really skinny wires over the top of one of the lights or lamps in the parking lot, and we kept getting hung up on either a bolt or a little tiny crevice that the thin wire would slip into, and then we'd have to try to wrangle it out. And so finally
Oh.
we shot up the wire after about 3 times, something a little heavier that wouldn't fall into the crevice. And so it was, believe it or not, it was Harbor Freight cheapo thick cord to the rescue.
Hmm.
And then I know CERT teaches knots, and our local regional antenna guru teaches knots, although he realizes a lot of people are not necessarily good at knots, so he shows some other suggestions. If you go to practicalantennas.com, he started to record 40 years worth of, going out and stringing up a line. They even have videos.
Hmm.
But his granddaughter's making videos.
That's good. As far as the line getting caught up, one of the best antenna wires we found is it comes from Davis RF, and it's their flex weave with the polyethylene coating, not the PVC, but the polyethylene, which is tough and slick. And we find that'll slide over tree branches and all sorts of things when other wire tends to get hung up.
Okay, Richard, WA7VKE, got your hand up. You want to take it away?
Yeah. When I first started trying to hang antennas, I was using a 35-pound bow, and I had pretty good luck, but I could not get it up quite high enough. It's just not enough power to it. So I got a wrist rocket and a spinner reel and hooked it up with some hose clamps. The whole thing cost me $25. They sell the same thing in QST for $100. But I use that, and you get the heaviest lead sinker you can find for shooting it up there, and it works great. I recommend that highly. Don't buy the one from QST. I hate to say that, hurting to advertise it, but it's works really well, and it's not that expensive.
I've used a wrist rocket to put stuff over trees too, and usually it's pretty good. The one thing you have to be careful of is, especially if you're in a semi-populated area, make sure that weight doesn't land on somebody's car window.
Always remember that what goes up must come down.
Yep.
Carolyn,
Very good.
You got your hand up, Carolyn. Take it away.
Yeah, first question from Marty. What was that wire you were talking about that's easy to put up?
Oh, it's called flex weave. It's a very high strand count wire. They make it at number 12 and number 14. It's made by Davis RF, which is a subsidiary of Orion Wire and Cable, and they're back east. And they have different. You can get it bare, you can get it tinned, and one of the choices is to get it with a polyethylene or PE coating. And that, if you've ever handled like Andrew Heliax and stuff like that, polyethylene is what they make those jackets out of, and they're tough and slick. And because this wire has so many strands, it's like 256 strands for the number 12 or something. It's almost like rope, so it's very flexible. It doesn't have hard coil kink like you would with some solid wires. Oh, that doesn't look good.
So this was what in my bed when I was packing up to leave, and obviously been there with me all 3 days. It was about 3 inches across.
Did it affect your SWR?
I'm not sure what species it is. It has striping on it. Someone said it
Didn't
might
have
be
a red
wolf
belly
style.
though, did it?
No, it did not. And
Oh,
it
then
didn't
you're
bother me.
okay.
I didn't bother it. But
Sounds
this was
good.
the other thing about this campground. We found out that the deer don't act like deer. They act like pets. They come up to you, and one came up about 3 feet behind me while I was operating on Saturday afternoon on the porch and made a loud belching sound right behind me. I think he wanted to operate 40-meter phone. This is a cobweb antenna from MFJ that I've modified with the PVC conduit, so it comes apart. Each of these segments comes apart, so I can transport it. It's not as the poles are too long the way it comes, so I'm assembling it here. And let's continue on this. This is a mast pipe that I talked about last week on RATPAC. This is from Harbor Freight, and this was a follow-up to my talk on news. Kent had put up an email last, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, about a Harbor Freight cell on a flagpole that collapses. And I got that flagpole. And the nice thing is the top of the flagpole accommodates one of those 48-inch mast pipes that a lot of us have laying around that are actually supports for military supports for camouflage. They're not really
yeah.
for antennas, but you notice I have one here, and mounted on that, I have this is the pole right here. I mounted the cobweb on there. So then I go out in the field and I pushed it up.
So you've got an insulated top mast section and the rest is metal.
Yes, and it also holds the guy rope plate in place, and it still is able to put up the flag. And there happened to be I was getting ready to lash it to the bare trash can, but my wife said, "Hey, there's a pole in the backyard," and she says it has some wire on it. And it turned out it was an old clothesline. The other end of the clothesline was missing, so I lashed it with clove hitches. And I have a piece of wood at the bottom, so it starts up about 18 inches off the ground. And then this fortunately was a hill, so I was able to stand on the hill and extend this up to 20 feet with the top extension. It was 24 foot high.
Very good. And now I know a number of our Aries folks in Los Angeles use those flagpoles. They have them on the on one of their trailers and so on. The one thing you have to be a little careful of, I understand, is that the locking mechanism, which is kind of a twist lock,
yes,
can slip a little bit. So you don't want something super heavy on there. Like I wouldn't put a tri-band aluminum Yagi on there, but for holding up wires and plastic stuff, it's probably quite good.
You know what I think it'd be excellent for too is for VHF UHF. A small VHF UHF antenna would be perfect. And the thing that would work absolutely perfectly would be a VHF UHF vertical, a dual band fiberglass vertical. So if you want to set up a quick link for FM, 2 meter 440, this would work great for that.
Yeah,
$54.
like a Comet GP1 or GP3, something like that.
You can see it behind the cabin here. This was my shack, the front porch here, and the deer was in between this guy rope and me, so that's how close the deer was. The skunks walked across the front here. I didn't get a good picture of the skunks, and I was assisted in the fact that breakfast was brought out to me, which was a nice delight that my wife brought breakfast out to me. I'm operating two stations here. I'm operating 2 Bravo 1 operator. So the station on my left, your right, is my FT8 station. It's a KX3 with one of the rig mini what's the name of DigiRig, little adapters, and then a 12-volt computer that I'm running through my power distribution block here. I went all weekend operating this radio in this computer with one battery, and I only use 50% of it. In my Go box here, I have my second KX3, and I'm operating CW mainly with that and a little bit of phone. And then my other logging computers on the other side of me there, you really can't see it. Also, spend some money and get a banner that you can always put up at your site. This was very inexpensive. A little vinyl banner that I had made. I have a QR code, so when they shoot that QR code, it goes to my website. But you could do this for your club also if you don't have something like that. I think that's the last. Oh, here we go. This is the phone and CW station. I'm using N1MM, and I'm also using a piece of software here that takes the the output from the decoding system in the KX3. It's Win for K3 suite, and it puts it on the screen here so I can look back in things that were a long time ago. And this was really nice for copying the field day bulletin because I captured PSK31 and then just saved the text file, so I didn't have to transcribe it onto paper. By the way, did anyone else think the field day bulletin was way too long with nothing in it?
I got several complaints about that, but I just copied it on CW and but yes, it was pretty lengthy. The other thing I remember in the old days, I used to get, when I was on the board, I used to get complaints that, oh, there was a mistake in the field day bulletin. And I told them that was intentional to see if you were actually copying or just writing down what you think you should hear. And I don't think they do that anymore.
Well, I think there was an error in it because I was copying on a PSK31 and I think one of the words was misspelled, but I'm not sure about that. It may have just been a glitch too. You know, sometimes with digital mode, sometimes you'll get one wrong letter just randomly. So that's a
Yeah, no,
possibility.
I listened to it twice, and I didn't hear any misspellings or anything like that, which so the Easter eggs are kind of gone from there. Also, Anthony, you mentioned 12-volt computer. You know, one of the things we learned on a couple of our expeditions where the AC was very unreliable is that most laptops will run fine on 12 volts. The fact that the power supply is 18 or 19 volts is only to help quickly charge the battery.
Yes.
But if you actually open up the battery inside take a look at the battery inside the computer itself, it's usually 12 volts or less. So don't let the label on the power supply scare you from using it on 12.
Yeah, this particular one does have a 12-volt input though, and I just put I put in the line between the charger and the computer, I put Anderson power pole so I can take it apart and plug it into my 12-volt system. And that little distributor block I have is a very simple way to manage your power, and you can also get these with voltage indicators and current indicators in them. So this lets me split up one big battery into multiple batteries. But the other thing I like to do too is I like to have multiple batteries of medium size in case I have a battery failure, or I accidentally, run a battery down somehow. That way I have more batteries to back up on. I could have actually operated for 4 days, I think, with with my two stations with the amount of battery excess.
Yeah,
I
well,
had.
running 5 watts. Yeah, you got a lot of time there. We were running a normal 100-watt stations, and for mine, I had my 100 amp hour Bioenno, and then I had a second one ready to go, but I never even got all the way through the first one, even keeping it busy all weekend. So those things work quite well and much easier to lug than the old lead ones.
Okay, let's get
Here's
John.
where I was at. If you're wondering, this is near Snowshoe if you're a skier, or if you're a scenic railroad fan, this is near Cass, West Virginia. So
Okay.
it's in the southwestern portion of the state, right over the line basically from Virginia. So you actually have a good shot into Virginia, and I worked a lot of Virginia stations on 80 meters.
Yeah. Paul reminds us in the chat to make sure you have a backup. Not all logging programs automatically back up as you enter. So and if some of the old ones, you actually have to manually, click something to every 20 or 30 QSOs to back it up. So a good reminder. How we doing in?
You also might want to make an ISO, an image of your computer. I had one of mine one day, for some reason, it just died so much. I'm having to go into the BIOS, see if I can boot from a USB, totally put an OS back on. I didn't even write down the Windows product ID. It just totally is gone.
Wow.
Okay, John's had his hand up for quite a while, and Dave just put his hand up. So John, go ahead and take it.
Yeah, well, just a comment that I had is that we had to go on to a lightning hold for about 4 hours at our place. Some thunderstorms came up, and one of the things we learned was that the way you shut down all of your radios and your mesh network and everything else makes a difference. Because we had some struggles when we got back up at 1 o'clock in the morning, making sure everything was functioning correctly again. So that's something we'll work on for next year, is ensuring that we have a good shutdown procedure in case we have to drop offline quickly.
Good point.
John, we have a station instead of instructions, and one of the things I had in the station instructions for the computer is don't even bother turning the computer on until you make sure the radio's turned on and everything is connected. Then power up the computer, then start the programs. Especially WSJTX doesn't like not finding the port it's looking for, the sound card that it's looking for. So making sure you have the radio up and everything connected before you start the software is something I make sure I tell everyone ahead of time.
That's a good point, Anthony. Thanks. Yeah, like I said, that was something we learned. Like, we didn't shut everything down perfectly because it caused us some challenges getting the mesh network and all those things back up. And I think we kind of figured out that probably if we had to do it again, we would just turned the radios off, unplugged the antennas, and just left the mesh network alone.
Okay, Dave, you got your hand up, sir.
Yes, I wanted to share what we did for antennas for our field day here. This is using the 4-foot fiberglass pole kits. And so we actually used 10 of the poles. We put up 5, and then we anchor them or guide them at the midpoint, and then an additional 5 to go on up to the top. So we have 40-foot poles, and we put 3 of them in a row, and then hang 2 dipoles between them. So
Wow.
this is a single sideband side, and this is a multi-band dipole here. It's a fan type dipole, and the one that goes from there down there is a 40-meter only dipole. So we have a station, one sideband station that operates on 80, 20, 15, and 10. So operates on 80 at night and 20, 15, and 10 in the daytime. And then the other station operates on 40, 24 hours a day. And we actually do the same setup essentially on the other side of the field from us there for the CW stations, almost exactly identical. We have a fan dipole and a 40-meter dipole for the CW stations. And it works real well because the dipoles are end to end, so there's very little coupling between them. You also notice that we have them oriented in such a way that we don't have the airport tower there broadside to our dipoles. That was a deal that we made with the airport radio officer. And we don't put up beams either because we promised that we weren't going to point a beam at their tower. This is at the Ann Arbor Airport. So I just thought that would, the only thing is that this is manpower intensive to get these poles up. It takes about 5 people. You have to have 3 people on the guy wires and 1 guy standing up on a step ladder, holding up the bottom, the bottom pole, and a guy underneath stuffing new poles up under them. And you go up, 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 up. It goes up quite quickly as long as you have 5 people to do the work.
Yeah,
And you make a good point about getting the antennas end to end, so there's minimum interaction. But also, I know people who have taken those fiberglass camo poles and they think they can lay them out on the ground and then Iwo Jima them up, and you can't. They're made to hold vertical load, not horizontal load. And I've seen them snap. So your idea of pushing them straight up is perfect.
Right, and when you take them down, you don't just drop them either.
Nope.
Yes.
Same way, reverse process, one at a time, take them down and keep it vertical.
Yeah.
Dave, what call sign was your group using there in Ann Arbor?
We're using a Whiskey 8 Romeo Papa.
Okay, I think I worked you guys.
Yeah, that actually was Roy Purchase's old call sign, the fellow that ran Purchase Radio in downtown Ann Arbor.
Yeah, my wife and I tried to push up that same cobweb 2 years ago using a set of the fiberglass poles, and it almost turned into a snapping disaster. I'm surprised it didn't snap, but so that's why I went with something I could push up this year. I've actually seen a design for a field stacking method where there's a device that actually keeps raising the tower, and then you put the next section in and it pushes it up, and then you put the next section in. I saw an example of K3LRs. He had one sitting on the side lot next to his antennas, but it was a military I guess you call it a machine for lack of a better term, but it basically pushed up mast pipes up to a certain height. You put in a new one, and then it pushed that up, and then you put in a new one. They kept continuing that way.
Yeah. Well, this is something that we've kind of developed over many years. We had done various kinds of stuff in the past, but we just kind of fell into this because a number of us had bought bags of those poles, at various hamfests, and we got together and said, well, gee, these things make good dipole things. And for the GOTA station, we actually just put up a single one and then run 80 and 20, 40 meter and 20 meter inverted V's off of that for the GOTA station.
Very good. Hey, Dave, by the way, you're in our field day log. I just checked 20 meter CW. I worked you guys.
Yeah, well, we had some very good CW operators there. Dan, KB6NU, personally put in more than 500 CW contacts in the log.
Oh, very good. Well, thanks for the cue.
Victor, what you got there, sir? Victor.
He's unmuted.
Not to find my microphone. Before I go into this, are you doing this in specific category, topic, subgroups, or is this an open roundtable?
Open.
We like to
Okay.
have the hands go up.
Okay, thank you. I did not participate in my field day this year. And the reason, at the last minute, our location had been changed. We had, and I don't know the details behind the whole situation. I understood we had a permit with the city for a park we use regularly. And something happened down at that park or something, it suddenly became unavailable. What was interesting was we were not able to use our parks that we've used in the past. And we wound up going outside of the city, outside of any protocol we'd ever done before. My point here is I don't think we have that as a backup. I don't think we had a backup site planned. Somebody got lucky and was able to finagle a site for us for the last 15 minutes or whatever it was at the 11th hour to get us to a new location. If anything's in your planning, it's to have a number 2 site. You never know what's happening. We had a couple years ago, we had a neighborhood city doing neighborhood operations activation, and they were at Fred Meyer. Now, if the Fred Meyer catches on fire, you're not holding your event there that day. That would be certain. So yeah, that's my advice is, that's my takeaway is have that backup site reserved and ready just in case.
Very good.
Thank you.
I see that Richard's got his hand up.
Yeah, we learned an important lesson this time that there is a lot of value to having a backup site. We moved to a suburban park in Chubbuck, Idaho last year and fell in love with this place. It was a great place, worked out great. So he says, let's go back again this year. We got there this year and somehow in the houses around there or whatever, we got a lot of noise. I don't know if they put it into the solar system or appliances or what, but we had noise problems this year. And so just because a site is great one year doesn't mean it's going to be great the next year. Watch out for those things.
Wow. And yeah, just we had a problem last year with 80 meters. Everything was really noisy. Fortunately, it wasn't as bad this year, but it's a good idea just because something has some elevation, to do a little survey, bring a portable radio and listen on this place before you go and commit to putting it up there. That's a good point, Richard. Thank you.
Barry, what you showing there in chat?
Lots of good comments, but no questions.
Oh, that's a direct thing to me. I'm sorry. I thought you were sending it out to everybody.
Nope, just see you. We're getting some very bad thunder, lightning, and rain here right now.
Oh dear. Okay, well, be careful. I wonder, anybody have anything they tried for the first time this year that worked out really well? Dave?
Yeah, my K4D.
Oh,
That was the station that you contacted on 20CW.
okay. Well, we in our previous sessions on field day, both last year and this year, we talk about, if you can, use the robust radios, the ones that have a very good IMD specs and a strong signal handling capability. If you're going to have more than one radio on the air, they got to try and not talk to each other. And we have to go through that every year when we go on contest expeditions, except this time we're running kilowatts, so we have to have them good. And the K3, K4, they're right up at the very top of the list in terms of clean signals transmitted and robust receivers. So
Well, I was
choice.
I was nervous about the K4 because it's not the K4 HD. That's not available yet. And so I brought my K3S as a backup, and we never had to use it to replace the K4 station. It worked with flying colors. But we did end up using the K3S to replace an ICOM 7610 for the GOTA station because it was getting blocked by the 40 meter CW station.
And the Kenwood wasn't. The K3 wasn't.
Yeah, the K3S was just great.
Yeah. I use my K3 for 20 and 80, and it's a wonderful field day radio.
Yeah, we generally use K3s for most of our radios at field day. It's an exception when we don't.
Yeah, smart move, especially when you got a lot of transmitters. Did you have stations going in band, one foam, one CW at the same time?
Yeah, we actually had three because we had a GOTA station on 40 meters, a CW station on 40, and a sideband station on 40, and they all operated as long as the GOTA station would stay about 15 to 20 kilohertz away from the other stations. We never had any trouble.
Excellent. How about anybody else? You tried something for the first time that worked really well?
I'm interested, Mary Jo, over in Virgin Islands. What you guys got going over there?
Well, we had a setup down at the Crown Bay cruise ship dock. We had, let's see, we had a couple of people with the handhelds, and we had 1, 2, 3, I think we had 4 HF stations set up, but I don't know the details. I'm not, what do you call it? I basically operate using my handheld on a day-to-day basis, so I don't have an HF rig, so I don't know all the details of what worked and what didn't work.
Was Fred KP2 N9VV part of that operation?
No, Fred was in St. Croix.
Okay.
I'm in St. Thomas.
Oh, you're at St. Thomas. Okay.
Yeah.
What
They
call
were
were you using?
We were using, we were using the Club W. Oh, well, I'll look for it and
Oh,
I'll.
it's okay. No problem. Just
Yeah.
wondering.
Yeah, but Fred, they were operating out of the Red Cross office in St. Croix. So that's close to the middle of the island.
Uh-huh.
And we were just west of downtown Charlotte Amalie in St. Thomas.
All right. Very good. Pretty area.
John, BSV, you got your hand up again.
Yeah, Motor Mouth is here again.
No, that's my label.
Anyway, no, just about things we hadn't tried before. Well, we joined forces with our county Aries group, and man, that worked out really neat. We had basically we tried to get all the hands in the county in one place, and that really worked well. And the other thing that we were working is we were running we had our band plan, so we were running try to keep everything separated. And we were running also like our FTH station, we ran on a vertical, and the SSB stations, we were running horizontal, so that we tried to minimize crosstalk between the antennas. And those seem to work pretty well, between that and bandpass filters and stubs.
Very good. How many transmitters did you have going at once?
In between the total area, we had 4. We were running 2A and Aries was running 2A, and we had coordinated a band plan so that we weren't tripping over each other.
Oh, so you were actually 2 separate entries.
2 separate entries, and we were a 6-acre piece of ground.
Okay. Interesting.
I worked 2 12 alpha stations. That must be an amazing thing to set up.
That's got to be crazy.
Ray.
Oh yeah, W3AO was probably one of them.
Yes, they were.
And in fact, they used to go.
They were close to me.
Yeah, they used to go like 32A before they changed the rules. And I read an article once on how all the stuff they do to set up so that they can have all these stations going on at once without killing each other. And it really was a coordinated and well thought out effort. But man.
Speaking of FT8 and FT4, I have a word of wisdom for everyone for next year. Please do not send the Roger extra thing and never send the 73. I had many, I probably could have worked 30% more stations if people would have just finished up after the initial exchange. Instead, they sent the Roger, and then went off into Never Land. So that was a big issue. Also, if anyone's having issues as far as getting your logs combined from your stations, there's been a number of questions on the N1MM mailing list. There's a couple of steps that I found over the years. First of all, make sure you copy all your files before you do any importing into the N1MM, so you still have your original files. Then make sure that you set up a new copy of field day log in N1MM. I can show you right now, and make sure that you have it include all of the modes you're going to operate. So if you're going to operate multiple modes, make sure that you have it set up to have all those modes. So on your log, when you're setting it up, the one that's going to be the composite of everything, make sure that you have, where did it go? Going off in nowhere land. I'm not sure what screen it went on to, but make sure you have your CW phone and your digital all there. And then you can simply import your ADIF files and combine them all. I would suggest you import your digital one first and hit the rescore button, and you're going to be surprised because you're not going to get all the QSOs you thought you did, because if you work someone on FT4 and FT8 both on the same band, that's a dupe. They don't count separately. So don't be surprised if you're down 10 or 20% on your contacts if you were working both FT8 and FT4. And if you were only operating FT8 and not operating FT4, shame on you, because you missed the chance to make quicker contacts on less crowded sections of the band. So people are still getting used to FT8, FT4 as a field day mode. And it was very surprising, some of the tricks that were being used or not used.
Jim B, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I'll give you an overall. I worked with the Fairlawn Amateur Radio Club. We set up down at Memorial Park by us, and we had like 5 or 6 stations, 6, I guess, at the max. We had a GOTA station on 146.520. I set up a WinLink station on an ICOM 7100. I sent out to the section manager and sent out a bunch of messages, trying to get the 200 points. We had an FT8 station. We had another 80 meter station, and then a 2040. During the day, it was 20, and then when it got bad, we went up to 40. And then we had a bunch of guys doing CW on another station. So we had a bunch of people going up. Basically, we went out Friday night. We threw up. We got 2 end feds and 1 center fed. The 80 meter was a center fed. We threw 2 end feds up. One guy set up a spider. We tested out a couple of spider antennas. I had an inverted V. I used what is it, with the UVR5, the junior. So we had a good time. We cooked, had barbecue, food, drinks, good camaraderie. We were making a little party out of it. So we had a good time.
Sounds like fun.
I don't know exactly how many points we got, but we should be up there. I think we operated. I think it was 3A. I think we were 3A. I think that's how it went. But anyway, we had good times.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Peter, got your hand up, sir.
Hey there. I just am curious as to what different clubs do for bandpass filters. Do your clubs get together and buy the filters, since field day is probably the only time you use them? How do you guys handle that sort of thing when you've got multiple stations set up for field day? You try to keep them from stepping on each other.
Can I comment on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to hear anybody's thoughts.
Well, again, I'm Jim from the Fairlawn Amateur Radio Club, and that's exactly what we did, because we had some, we didn't want anybody to cross over. So the club got together and bought them. And we also use them at the club too, just for extra protection. So we don't use them all the time, but we use them a lot of the time.
Yeah. In our case, I already had a full set for our expeditions. I also bought a a nice triplexer. I was going to build one, but there's a fellow up in Canada who makes them much nicer than I could make them. And so we have a single tri-bander for the higher bands. And then we just run that to the triplexer. And then the outputs go through these bandpass filters to the various stations. And each one of us, it's like it's our own tri-bander and we don't know the other people are on. But even if you can't do that, and those are good for probably 40 or 50 dB of attenuation, but even the simple coax stub filters can get you, 20 dB or better.
And they're probably the cheapest ones by far.
Oh, yeah, because you can build them yourself.
I was surprised to find out this year that 2 or 3 other members of the club had gone ahead and bought their own contest filters. So when we came out and the club actually owns a set. I had bought a bandpass or 2 a few years ago, which I use. But it turns out that we had 2 other sets of contest filters already supplied by other members of the club. So we worked out, that came out real well. So
you had an abundance of filters.
Yes.
Carolyn, you got your hand up, ma'am. Carolyn.
Yeah, we were, we set up with the Los Angeles Amateur Radio Club. We had 3 alpha stations. One was running CW, one was running 40 and 20, and the other was running 10, 15, and 80 meters. And we had a UHF, VHF station, and we had a WinLink station, which I ran. I'm sending out radiograms, and we had a station that was demonstrating. Sorry.
Hello, Carolyn.
I'm sorry, my television all of a sudden came on, and
Oh.
we had a satellite station for demo, and we had a digital station that for our educational thing, and that digital station was quite popular because people stopped by, and he was teaching literally all day long how to use the digital modes.
Cool.
And yeah, we had a good time. We set up at Cal State Dominguez Hills on the parking lot, and we had plenty of room to spread out. And but one thing that happened, we haven't had our after action thing. It'll be on Sunday, so I don't have much to report about what worked well and didn't. But one thing that happened was that the food tent, the wind just blew it apart.
Ooh,
Yeah,
not good.
yeah, the wind gets really gusty out there on that parking lot. And all the other tents and pop-ups, they held up, but the one that the food was in, the wind just blew it apart.
Oh,
You had to get a sturdier tent for that one.
huh.
We
Carol,
had
I'm glad to hear you were on the you were doing the WinLink station. Not only did Carolyn, pick up and learn WinLink over the last year or two with our ACS group, she went ahead and set up her own gateway. So she's really into it, and glad to hear that worked out well.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And
Was Barry there? I take it.
Oh, of course, Barry was running the CW station. I think he made like 600 contacts on CW.
Beautiful.
So I think that's what he said. Anyway, so we had a really good time. We had 21 people to show up of our members to work, and it was a really good time. I'm glad I had a chance to participate. I participated with them last year and this year. In fact, I wrote the plan for it this year. But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Wonderful.
Marty, I figured out we forgot to ask. We forgot to ask who had over 110-degree temperature at their location.
Not
no.
I, said the duck.
Yeah, the East Coast was sweltering. But
Yeah, we got lucky. We've had that certainly, but then probably the guys up in the up in Ridgecrest in that area where they're usually well over 100. But temperature here, we got probably in the low 80s at worst. So severe clear. We were lucky.
Okay, Ray, on an earlier conversation I had with Ray, he's a section manager, and he was telling us how he toured the area, which is what we're all supposed to do as section managers, to visit the different field day sites. What kind of surprises did you find, Ray?
Well, I think the biggest surprise that we had was we had one club, which was the Hamden Club in Holyoke. They were in a park in the center of town, more or less. And Saturday morning, they were setting up. They put some fruit and some donuts on a picnic table. And the guy came out of his camper and looked over and saw a bear mowing down the donuts.
Oh, no.
Well, he's feeding the wildlife.
So, yeah, I mean, I asked him, I said, well, didn't you invite him to go to the GOTA station and make contacts? They weren't too warm and fuzzy about that one. But yeah, that was an unusual one. Last year, yeah, we roasted. This year, the area was pretty much socked in with on and off showers, depending on where you were. So some of our field day sites turned into mud bogs, and others just got spotty showers. But I noticed that some of the clubs actually changed their tactics a little bit due to lighter participation, and they adapted. So they either went with a lower power, smaller antennas, and they changed it up a little bit, which I thought was good. Keeps people from getting bored, and the older folks too. They're getting a little tired of putting up the tri-banders and all that other stuff. So that worked out well for them. We actually had one club who is kind of using it as, well, he calls it a last-ditch effort. They are struggling a little bit. So what he did was he invested some money in a lot of food, a lot of advertising, a lot of publicity to get people over there and either reintroduce them or introduce them to radio. And I haven't heard the reports yet, but the members that were there actually enjoyed doing what they did. So they really didn't pay much attention to the points. It was the publicity that they were trying to get. Overall, my section are all calling everything a success despite the rain.
Great.
Thank you, Ray. And thank you for picking up the slack for some of us slacker SMs.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. This has been really good. This is the first time we've done something quite like this. How do you folks feel about us doing some more of this kind of stuff as we go into the future here?
I think it's
I learned some stuff, so I'm in.
Okay.
Hey,
Sounds
Dan,
good to me.
ISA,
Go ahead, ISA.
is one of our groups here in Oregon. I think the fellow or a couple of them live in what might be a retirement community / golf course kind of thing. So they have an amateur team. So basically they set up for a day or two there at the golf course, do the radio thing and also do a little education. And, when it's over, you jump in your golf cart and drive home.
Some people could do that with an airplane to live by the airport. Vic,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to do a thing with the National Tribes. They're doing this disaster airlift relief team. And so I'm not going to be there this year, but I started last year. We're going to be out there doing HF 40 and 80, VHF, UHF, and the pilots will fly around the Northwest from Walla Walla, taking potatoes, carrots, and onions to different small airports, and then we'll help with the comms. And then the food actually goes to food banks.
That sounds interesting.
Great.
I'm kind of doing
Good
that
idea.
instead of a field day, because then we go into a spot and we don't do all the cool things we want to do. We provide a service for them, and so we have to get what they need, which I like that.
All right.
And I wanted to share something here, and I'll share it in the chat. This is an article I wrote for the Ohio Section Journal in April, but a lot of clubs spend a lot of time on field day, but then they don't ever get back on the air as a group. So there's a lot of opportunities with POTA, SOTA, your state QSO party and other things. So maybe the goal for a lot of clubs should be to try and plan another field activity besides field day and besides winter field day to get their members out, because I think it is one of the most popular activities for many people, for many clubs. And so the article is called "It's a Pity Field Day is Just Once a Year," and I put the link to it in the chat.
Thank you. Very good idea.
Thanks. Okay.
Victor, you've had your hand up for a while. You want to give us a shout? Victor. Victor, you went away.
No, he's unmuting.
There we go. One moment. I like these roundtables, open discussions. If you have them quarterly, every 6 weeks, there are a lot of things that come up that are not necessarily under somebody's topic or presentation, or maybe we close out too early and there's more questions that we want to ask that we can share with each other and answer for each other. I think it's a great idea just to just keep the Grace Health functioning.
Thank you.
Yeah, we learned a lot, and I know we all have, every one of us, regardless of how long we've been in the hobby or anything else, we all have stuff to offer and things to learn. That's what it's all about. And this has been enjoyable tonight and an eye opener. I think we'll try to plan some more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for all your comments and contributions and everything. It was great to hear what everybody was doing, and great to work those of you we did. And it sounds like everybody had generally a safe field day, which is always good to hear. And by the way, that safety officer checklist that gets you your bonus points is not just for points. It's we're serious about our safety briefings because we're on fire department property and we don't want to have to go next door and ring them up. Anyway, I've got to head out. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all your time and sharing all your info with us.
Hang on one second. Mary Jo may have something for you. Go ahead, Mary Jo.
Yes, I was a safety officer, so that was cool.
Good for you. Excellent.
Yes, thank you very much.
Just one other quick comment, because you reminded me with the band pass filters. They work good when you with a big group. The other thing is just throw out there is headsets, because it gets a little hectic there when it first kicks off if you don't have headsets. So we had to go out and get a couple of headsets for people because it gets a little noisy there.
Boy,
Anyway,
yeah, there's one big club here in Southern California that I used to visit when I was vice director, and they had one massive, like, circus-sized tent, and they had like 10 stations in it, and nobody was wearing headphones, and it was like the Tower of Babel. I finally convinced them to put headphones on, and it made it much more comfortable. But yeah, it's easier also to hear. You don't have to have your radio at such a high volume when you have headphones on. You can keep the volume down and still hear what's going on. Good point.
Okay, Marty's got to go, and we're shooting over the hour. Is there any more last minute comments of any kind?
Thanks for the contacts, everyone. 73.
Stay safe.
73 is everyone.